I want to talk to you about pancreatitis and your dog being fussy. Now, before we start, my name is Sam. I'm a dog and cat nutritionist, and today we'll be discussing a problem I deal with all the time in consultations whenever I talk to people who have these same issues. So I hope this is going to help you. Now, if you have a dog with pancreatitis and the dog is being fussy, the first thing you need to consider is that the dog might be in pain, especially if the dog has acute pancreatitis. Now, there are two very different pancreatitis conditions. One is acute, one is chronic or ongoing. Now, if your dog has acute pancreatitis, that is a 48 to 72 hour bout, and you have to be very careful as to what you give the dog and as to how you treat your dog, and probably your vet is the best person to address that situation because each case is going to be different. And so if your dog has acute pancreatitis, that means that your dog's pancreas is acutely stressed and you shouldn't take that lightly. But in most cases, I deal with dogs having chronic pancreatitis. And whenever a dog has chronic pancreatitis, the condition comes and goes. And so sometimes the dog's pancreas will acutely inflame, for example, or will flare up, and your dog might be off of their food, and that is okay to a certain extent. The problem becomes when this is an ongoing issue. When it's an ongoing issue, you do have to remember that the condition has to override the behavior. So providing your dog's pancreas is okay, and yes, your dog has pancreatitis, but it can be managed, you have to be very careful if your dog is being picky, if your dog is being fussy, that now you have two issues. You have the condition of pancreatitis and the condition of your dog being fussy. So let's address pancreatitis firstly. Your dog's pancreas secrete three different digestive enzymes: amylase, protease, and lipase. Amylase breaks down carbohydrates, protease breaks down protein, and lipase breaks down lipids, fats. And so the most common test that your vet will do is they will look at excess fat in the blood, hyperlipidemia, and say, right, your dog needs a low-fat diet to deal with pancreatitis. Now, the problem with a lot of these veterinary prescription diets, or a lot of the diets that dogs get put on whenever it comes to pancreatitis, are very low in fat forever. And you cannot do that for a very long time. You cannot be on a 2% fat diet forever. You cannot be on a 5% fat diet forever. Your body needs fat, albeit the good fats. So that would be the first thing I will look at. Chronic low-fat diets aren't good for dogs, even if they have pancreatitis. If they have acute bouts of pancreatitis, then yes, you do have to reduce the amount of fat, but controlling overall calories and managing overall caloric intake in a dog with chronic pancreatitis is where the sweet spot is. And why do I say that you cannot put your dog on a low-fat diet forever? Because those calories need to come from somewhere. And so let me ask you a question. If you eat pasta 7 times a day and you overconsume calories, do you not think you are going to put weight on? The answer is yes. Pasta is very low in fat, but it's very high in starches, very high in carbohydrates. And so those excess carbohydrates are then going to be converted into fat. So it's a lot more important for you to control overall calories than is to be fixated with that 2% fat target. Any excess carbohydrates are then going to be converted into fat. The technical term for it is called de novo lipogenesis, which is when excess carbs get converted into fat. Now, let's deal with your dog being fussy. If your dog is okay, and your dog, yes, has pancreatitis, but you can manage the pancreatitis somewhat and the dog doesn't have any flare-ups, first of all, keep the dog very well hydrated. Whether that's with water or whether that's with bone broth or adding egg yolks or whatever the case might be. Especially if your dog is dry fed, the first thing you need to do is up the water intake. Hydration levels need to be optimal. The second thing you want to do is make the food time limited and make the food somewhat scarce. if you are free feeding the dog 3 or 4 times a day, that's not the best for them. The best for them is for you to put the food down, and if they don't eat, you take the food away, you don't feed the dog, and then you present the food a few hours later or at night or the next day or whatever. And trust me, the dog will be fine if the dog is well hydrated and the dog's pancreas isn't too stressed. Having the dog eat all the time, having the dog eat treats all the time, it's not going to be good for their dog's pancreatitis. Why? Because the dog is going to be secreting these digestive enzymes all the time to be able to break down whatever you're feeding the dog. So you have to give the dog's digestive system time to digest and rest and regenerate. You can't keep on feeding the dog all the time. So the first thing is you being strict, you being super strict with the dog. The second thing I would do if my dog had pancreatitis and my dog was being fussy would be to monitor the situation every few weeks or every few months. If you take the dog to the vet and they tell you the blood lipids are high, hyperlipidemia, I want to monitor those blood lipids with careful eye. And so I would go back every few weeks or every few months. I would trace a plan and come up with a diet that will serve your dog's condition for the long term. A lot of the diets they recommend, once again, are very low in fat, chronically low in fat, which are unworkable long term, and they are very, very high in carbohydrates. And if you're trying to control your dog's digestive enzymes, you are going to be stressing that pancreas with the amount of carbohydrates in some of those diets, and that's not good for the dog either. Now, we have made a few videos on pancreatitis, how to deal with pancreatitis at home. I will pin those here. I have also made a few videos on some of the best low-fat foods and some of the best low-fat options for dogs with pancreatitis or without pancreatitis, some of the leaner cuts of meat, that those will absolutely help you. We have a DIY recipe book, we have a pancreatitis guide, and you can book us for a consultation down below. You have to be mindful that your dog's condition needs to override your dog being fussy. And the thing I see all the time is people feeding the dog tidbits and feeding the dog way too much whenever it comes to them having any dietary issues. The condition, the pancreatitis, is a pressing one, not the dog being fussy. If the dog is fussy, the dog is fussy. But we are trying to deal with a medical condition, and that has to come first. That has to be at your forefront, and that has to be your first priority and not the fussiness.